The clang of steel echoed through the battlefield. A lone warrior stood, sword in hand, eyes unshaken. This was no ordinary man. He was a man of justice, a defender of the weak, Charles the Good. He had fought not just with his blade, but with his heart, challenging the corruption that choked his land. But justice comes at a price. His enemies whispered in the dark, plotting against him. And on one fateful day, in the sacred silence of a church, they struck. Why did they fear him so much? Why was a man who fought for the poor silenced so cruelly? His story is one of courage, sacrifice, and betrayal. And today, we uncover the truth behind the warrior saint who defied corruption and paid the ultimate price. Blessed Charles the Good, warrior, ruler, and martyr, was born into nobility. His life was shaped by tragedy. At just 5 years old, he witnessed the brutal assassination of his father, King Canute IV of Denmark, slain within the sacred walls of a church. That moment, steeped in violence and betrayal, left an indelible mark on the young prince's soul. Raised in Flanders under the care of his maternal grandfather, Robert I of Flanders, Charles was not merely nurtured in courtly grace, but in the discipline of battle. From a young age, he trained in the arts of war, learning the ways of the sword, the lance, and the battlefield. But unlike many of his noble counterparts, Charles did not wield his strength for conquest alone. He fought for justice, for the protection of the weak, and for the preservation of peace. Before he was a ruler, Charles was a knight, one who lived by the chivalric code, where valor and virtue walked hand in hand. He took up arms alongside his grandfather and uncle in their military campaigns, proving himself not only a capable soldier, but a leader who inspired loyalty. During the Crusades, Charles's faith was put to the ultimate test. Inspired by the call to defend Christendom, he embarked on a journey to the Holy Land, fighting alongside other Christian knights against forces that threatened the sacred sites of their faith. He witnessed firsthand the brutality of war, the suffering of the innocent, and the cost of battle. Yet, amid the bloodshed, Charles remained steadfast in his principles. He was known not for senseless slaughter, but for his discipline and restraint. He believed war should serve a higher purpose, that power should be wielded with wisdom, and that the sword should be drawn only to protect, not to oppress. His presence in the Crusades strengthened his resolve to lead with justice when he eventually became Count of Flanders. When Charles took his rightful place as Count, his warrior's heart did not fade. It simply found a new battlefield. This time, it was not against armies, but against the forces of greed and corruption that preyed upon the vulnerable. At a time when famine ravaged the land, powerful families hoarded grain, driving prices beyond the reach of the starving. Charles did not stand idly by. He wielded justice like a blade, enforcing fair distribution, challenging the merchants who sought profit from misery, and ensuring that no one in his land was left to starve. But righteousness breeds enemies. Those who thrived on corruption saw him not as a noble ruler, but as an obstacle to their wealth. In the early morning of March 2nd, 1127, as Charles knelt in prayer within the church of Saint Donatian, assassins struck. They cut him down where he stood, murdering a man who had lived only to serve others. His people mourned, not just the loss of a count, but of a just and holy man. His martyrdom sealed his legacy, and to this day his name is invoked as a reminder of courage, integrity, and sacrifice. His feast day, March 2nd, stands as a call to action. Do we dare stand for what is right, even when it costs us? Will we fight for the voiceless, challenge injustice, and seek the good above personal gain? Justice is a lonely road, walked by the brave and paid for in sacrifice. Blessed Charles the Good stood against greed, not with anger, but with righteousness. He could have turned away, lived in comfort, ignored the suffering around him, but he chose the harder path, the one that led to his martyrdom. His story is not just one of the past, it speaks to us now. How often do we remain silent in the face of injustice? How often do we shrink back when standing up for the truth comes at a cost? But Charles reminds us, to live for what is right is to live fully. To serve the weak is to be truly strong. His life whispers a challenge to us. Will we have the courage to fight for what is good, even when the world resists? His blood fell like seeds upon the earth, and from it courage bloomed. May we too be willing to stand for justice, to speak for the voiceless, to give of ourselves, so that righteousness may shine through the darkness. Blessed Charles the Good, Pray for us so that we also live out our lives in steadfast devotion.